Hi, this is Scott Ford from MrFordsClass.com and Mr. Ford's Guide to the A+ Certification Exam, How to be a Computer Technician on iTunes. Welcome back. We are going to look at printer installation. This is continuing our Ustream presentations on printers. Initially, this was going to be printer installation and configuration, but the presentation got extremely long, and there was no way anybody wanted to watch all of it in one sitting, so we're breaking them up into two separate presentations. Before we begin, I'd like to have a personal thank you, or offer a personal thank you for those of you out there who have discovered my netcast. We've been getting extremely positive feedback on them. Thank you very much. And we've also hit 5,000 downloads in just 2 months and a couple of weeks. Right now, we're averaging about 1,000 downloads a week. So thank you very much out there. And I've also been looking at where these people have been coming from, where your subscribers have been coming from. And we're getting hits from all around the world, including Iraq. So hopefully it's our men and women out there in the field who are watching computer maintenance and not the other guys. But guys, I'm hoping that you're enjoying these. I'm hoping that I'm providing some entertainment to you. We very much appreciate what you're doing out there. Please come home safely. Family and friends are waiting for you. So let's continue with printer installation. And by the way, I was asked this in an email on the Ustreams why I keep turning my head. I'm on a dual screen. My eyesight, I'm on a MacBook Pro, is right here, and my PowerPoint is showing up over here on the bigger screen to record. So in order for me to move slides, I've got to kind of look this way to bring up the next one. All right, printer installs. Every tech anywhere has had to install printers. If you haven't, trust me, you will if you're going to be a computer tech. And there are 3 ways we can install printers, and that is through a local printer, through a network printer, as well as a TCP/IP setup. Installing a local printer is probably the most common way to install a printer. This is what most consumers do. They take the printer home with them. They have the little disk in the box. They put the disk in the computer. The disk shows them pretty colorful things. Click next, click next, click next. Congratulations, your printer's attached. Have a nice day. That's when it works out perfectly in a nice world. We're going to learn how to install a local printer when things don't work as well as they should. Here is an important tech tip, and that is when installing a printer, use the drivers on the disk first. Put those in the computer first and let them guide you on what you should do next in the installation process. If you install a printer USB and plug it in first, you might have problems with the whole setup. So always use the drivers first and then install the printer second. Windows XP, if you were to look at a Windows XP official training book, it will say just plug the printer in and Windows will find it on its own. That's kind of sort of true. Windows XP comes with a special file called drivers.cab. Drivers.cab is a kind of a storehouse in the Windows XP machine that has a ton of drivers on it. For those of you who are like me and older techs, remember working on Windows 98. One of the worst things that you could do to a computer was reinstall Windows 98, because you would go on what I call a driver hunt. You would have to go look for drivers, and you have to go to manufacturers' websites and just go hunting around for drivers, a real pain in the butt. If you've ever reinstalled Windows XP, it's not that bad. In fact, most of the drivers are found. That's because the drivers.cab file has a ton of generic manufacturer drivers built in that will actually kind of supplement or support the computer, so you don't have to go through that driver hunt anymore. Having said that, the drivers in the drivers.cab file are old files. You are better off in almost every situation to install them from a disk that comes with the device, or even better, to get brand new, fresh drivers from the manufacturer's website. And if you're a gamer, I'm going to point my finger at you, if you're a gamer, pay attention out there, because video drivers are ancient when you bring them home in a box. For video drivers, you want to go to the manufacturer and get the latest, the greatest, the freshest drivers that you possibly can. Okay, local printer manual installation. Again, while most local printer installations are simple, easy to do, if you need to do a little tweaking, this is what you're going to have to do. Now, regardless of if it's a local printer or if it's a network printer or a TCP/IP printer, you're going to use the Add Printer Wizard. And I don't want to date this video too much, but if you remember the I think it's Verizon? No, not Verizon. There's a cell phone commercial out here where these geeks get together and they come out with a wizard. Totally off tangent. Sorry, moving on. Okay, this is the common steps for all three setups. And you need to know these steps off the top of your head without looking. The first thing you do is click Start. And then you're going to see, as we see in the little picture here, the printer and faxes option. If you're working in classic mode, let's say you have your taskbar set to classic, you will not see that little icon. What you will see is an icon called Settings. You need to click on Settings and then click on the printers and faxes. So that's the common step. These are common steps regardless of how you install a printer. You then click on the Add a Printer icon. This is going to launch the wizard. Again, this is common, all three methods. You're going to get the little wizard pop up, you know, welcome to the printer wizard, you blah, blah, blah. You click Next, and then you get the next box, and this is the box where things will change. You can go local printer, you can go network printer. At this point, depending on which of the three you're going to use, you're going to have different options here. For a local printer, click on Local Printer, and then click Next. You can now choose from 3 different ports. This is default, okay? If you were to look at my classroom computer, you're going to see a whole bunch of ports that are listed because we've added printers multiple times to this printer, so you have different ports to choose from. But by default, you're going to have the 3 ones, and that's going to be LPT, which is parallel. This is old technology. You're not going to use parallel in a modern computer and a modern printer. You're going to be using USB. COM is serial. Again, this is really old, and unless you work on a specialized setup, let's say for a store, a retail store, you're not going to use the COM setup. And then you have file. File actually takes the thing you're going to print out and prints it to a file on the hard drive or a USB drive or some sort of storage media device. You can then later print from that. So you pick your port, and then you click Next. This screen is the drivers.cab thing. This is where you pick your printer. You can find the manufacturer, and you can find the model. So let's say you had an HP printer. You go manufacturer HP, and then your models would change, and then you pick the model of the HP printer. This is, again, from the drivers.cab file. This is not the best option. You might also notice they have a little button down here that says Have Disk. If you have the disk, this would be a good time to insert it. Again, the drivers you're going to get on the disk or from the manufacturer website are going to be better than the default ones within Windows. Once you've selected your printer and click Next, then you're going to get this other window that's going to want you to give it a name. Give it a good descriptive name. And this is going to be a common theme for the other 2 types of printer installations as well. If, let's say, you work at an office, a real estate office, and you have people in cubicles, and you have printers at each of the stations, and one of your employees' name is Steve, and you name his his printer, Steve's printer. Steve leaves. He quits the job. He goes off, whatever. Then you get Timmy comes in, okay? And Timmy now has that computer. Well, Timmy now has Steve's printer. And then Timmy winds up leaving, and then you get Mary. And Mary comes in, and now she has Steve's printer. She doesn't know who Steve is. In fact, probably half the people there don't know who Steve is because they've changed hands. So now you've got these printers. You've got a Steve printer. You've got, a Jimmy printer. You've got a Kyle printer. You've got a Cartman printer. Notice the pattern here. You've got these printers that nobody knows where they're at. So when you name a printer, give it a descriptive name that will tell people what it is. Going to a good example. I'm in a room. Let's say the room number was 123. If I installed a printer, I would call it printer room 123. People would know which printer it is. If I had 2 printers in my room, let's say a color laser and a black and white laser, I would name the black and white laser room 123 black and white laser. and room 123 color laser. I would list what type of printers they were, so regardless of who walks in, they know, hey, room 123, that's the printer in that room, no problem. Okay, so that's printer naming conventions. Now, if you're at home and it's you and a printer, name it whatever you want. Nobody cares. You can name it after your dog. Okay, but if you're in a business setting, you want to give it a descriptive name that anybody walking in can tell, that's that printer, we know what it is, we know where it's at, and we know what it does. Okay. A little bit of a rant, but that's important to know. When you're done with that, you're going to get another window that's going to want you to ask, it's going to ask you to print a test page. The answer to this is always, 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 always yes. If you're asked this on an A+ question, you know, flashing lights here. The A+ question, the A+ exam might ask you, when you're done with installing printers, when you're done working on a printer, what's the last step you should always do? The last step you should always do, regardless of what you've done to the printer, is always print out a test page. Okay? We had some techs that worked for us a while ago, and they remapped a whole bunch of printers to the different classrooms, and they were lazy techs. The reason why I say they were lazy techs is because they did not print one test page. And what wound up happening is I had to go and remap every printer because it didn't work and print test pages for every printer. So as a tech, the last thing you want to have anybody to do is have to clean up after you. Okay? Be a tech, be a good tech, be an uber tech, know what you're doing, take care of business. And part of that with printers is printing a test page. Here's a quick summary, and you need to know this down. Click on Start, select Printers and Faxes, select Add Printers, Wizard page, next, select local printer, click next, select port, next, use the disk if you have it, otherwise choose the manufacturer and the model, click next, name the printer, default yay or nay, next, and then print a test page. You need to know these steps. Also, I didn't mention what the default printer meant. When you set something to a default printer, you're saying that unless I tell you not to, print everything to that printer. That's what default means. All right, network printer. A local area network, otherwise called a LAN, in the early days was not driven by computers playing games or Xboxes connected to each other. In the early days, in the olden days, a LAN was basically pushed because an office would have one extremely expensive printer, $5,000 to $10,000 printer, and you maybe had 10 computers, and you would have to share these computers with, or you'd have to share that one printer with these different computers. So that's what caused the initial impulse to create local area networks, so you could share this very, very expensive one printer throughout the office. This also leads to something else which we'll cover in configuration of printers, in how to set permissions and priorities, and that is definitely a possible question on the A+ exam. We'll cover that in another topic, though. Trivia question for you. Way back in the day, when people used to have to bring their floppy drives from one computer to another computer to print out stuff, we had a name for it. It was called SneakerNet. Like as in tennis sneakers, it was called SneakerNet. So that was what we used to call it. Okay, network printers. Same as a local printer, about halfway through. Start, printers and faxes, add printer, wizard, next. Where it changes is on this page. It changes when you don't select local printer. You select a network printer. It kind of makes sense, right? So you select network printer or a printer attached to another computer. You click that, you click next. Then you're presented with three options. You can browse for a printer, you can connect to a printer, or you can connect to a printer on the internet. That's actually pretty cool, which we'll talk about in just a second. Browse for a printer. This is when you don't know what the printer's name is, but you know what's out there. So let's say we're in an office setting and we have 5 printers in our workstation. We can use this option and go look through the network for that printer. And if we've named it correctly, instead of Steve's printer and Timmy's printer, if we've named it correctly, we can go, okay, printer in cubicle 5. And so we know that's where that printer is. So we can browse for that printer. If we know the specific name for the printer, the exact area it's located at, we can just do connect to the printer. Put the information in, hit it, and it'll connect right to that printer. If, this is really cool. Let's take, for example, you are based out of Los Angeles, and you're in Houston. You want to print something up in the Los Angeles office. If your printer has been set up by a network administrator to connect to the internet, you can actually print via the internet to that printer back in LA. When I was still working at Best Buy way back in the day, we had a business person come in. He had two small offices. He had one, both of them were about 100 miles apart from each other. And he wanted to be able to print stuff back on that printer in the other office. And the way he would do it would be to do the internet. However, there is a bit of overhead with it. You really have to know what you're doing, and you have to have network access. I would not recommend doing this unless you know what you're doing, because you're opening up your network to online activity. You're opening up your network and say, hey, here's my printer, it's online, anybody can access it. So just don't do it for fun. Know what you're doing before you do it. All right, for most consumers, browse is just fine. They click on the browse button, they go and find the printer. Here's an example of that. This was taken actually from our school computer, and we can see that I could look through the Microsoft Windows Network, I could look to NDPS printers, I can go through NetWare, that's Novell, so I can look around for the different printers. TCP IP printers. Real quick, TCP IP is a protocol suite. It runs basically the internet. Some network printers will require the network setup options. Others will require TCP IP setup. Again, start, printers, faxes, add a printer, launch the wizard, click next. Here's where things change again. With a network printer, we selected network printer. With TCP IP printers, it's not intuitive. It doesn't make sense why they did this. You have to click local printer. So for a TCP IP printer, which is a network printer, you don't click network printer. You click local printer and make sure that the plug and play, the auto detect feature is unchecked. So for TCP IP, local printer. You will go down here to create a new port, and you're going to use the drop-down menu and select standard TCP IP port. You click next. It will launch the TCP IP wizard. Click next. And here's where you add the IP address. The IP address for a lot of these TCP IP printers have been given to them by a network administrator, or you have a setup on your network to give them an IP address. If you can't find one, actually you're going to get your IP address probably from your network administrator. A lot of printers will have a feature, if it's already been networked, if it's already been mapped to the network, you can print out the information, so you can print out the printer's TCP IP information from the printer. Otherwise, you're going to have to go to network administrators and find out what the address is. This is where you put the address. So in this case, it's 10.7.10.10. Notice I'm saying dot instead of period. We don't say 10 period 7 period 10 period 10. In IP world, we say dot. So it's 10.7.10.10. We put that in. The bottom thing, the port name is automatically given to us once you're putting the information in above. When you click next, you're going to wait a couple of seconds. It's going out there and going, is there a printer out there? Is this a real connection? So it might take a little while. Don't freak out. Then you're going to get a new screen that's going to ask you again, manufacturer and model. Default drivers, these drivers might be stored on your network somewhere. If you have a disk, use it. Again, always print a, I'm sorry, we skipped a step. It bypassed it. I was wondering about that. Again, name it, give it a good name. Don't name it Steve's printer or Timmy's printer. Name it after something that people will recognize. People can go in and say, oh, that's what that printer's for. And then, at the end of every printer job, you always, always, always print a test page. You'll then get a summary page for TCP/IP, what you installed, what is the printer, all that fun stuff. And that is it for printer installation. Now, I know this might seem incredibly boring to some people. When you need to install it, you're going to be happy you know how to do this. Also, again, you need to know how to do these without looking, because the A+ exam will ask you how to do these. I just recorded a previous netcast a minute ago on how to answer software-related questions. Quick recap of that: when you're answering software-related questions like how to install a printer, don't look at your answer choices. Come up with your answer in your head before you look at your answer choices, because they will distract you, confuse you, and cause you to miss the question. So when you're being asked how to install a printer, go through the steps in your head before you look at the answer choices. All right, folks, I hope you're enjoying these. Again, if you have any comments or suggestions or just want to say howdy, please drop me an email at mrford@mrfordsclass.com. Until our next presentation, have fun studying out there. Goodbye.